Issey Miyake Le Sel is the Eau de Toilette versus the Eau de Parfum. Which of these two unique freshes is the best? So you guys recommended me to buy the Eau de Toilette and it quickly went on to become a favorite of mine. And I recently did a review of the Eau de Parfum. And you can find my reviews of both in the pinned comment and in the description below. So both of these are made by the perfumer Quentin Bisch, which actually is the nose that's behind some of my favorites. But let's go through some of the similarities and differences. And of course, like always in my comparisons, which one I think is the best. So both have salt, seaweed, cedarwood and oak moss. But the Eau de Toilette also has ginger and vetiver, whereas the Eau de Parfum instead has amber and incense. And the EDT opens up intensely fresh with an intense dose of marine freshness that's also quite salty. It's intense, bright marine freshness, but its marine freshness is very different if you compare it to other sort of famous marine focus scents. And the main reason for that is because they are using seaweed, and its intense saltiness also helps in making this very different compared to most other marine fresh scents. The Eau de Parfum, at least to mine, opens up with a sort of a similar kind of intense marine freshness that is also intensely salty. And I keep going back and forth on which of these two I think is the most sort of salty. But there's a key difference, at least to my nose, and that is that the Eau de Parfum has a more mineral-ish kind of freshness to it. So both of these open up with a unique kind of freshness. However, I'm gonna say that I do think that the EDT's freshness is more intensely bright right away if you compare it to the Eau de Parfums. And the ginger in the Eau de Toilette definitely helps in making its freshness and brightness a lot more intense with its fresh spicy kick. So both open up in a very intensely fresh way, but the EDT more so. I think you can really start getting a sense of the differences once both move past the opening and into the heart. The heart of it is where the Eau de Toilette starts getting softly woody, so you're basically getting a mix of that intensely salty, marine and spicy freshness together with what I feel is quite a smooth dose of woodiness. So the heart of it is where the Eau de Parfum goes in quite a different direction when the incense starts pushing through, which basically starts to tone down the brightness and intensity of its freshness. So the heart of it is basically a combination with a bit of that initial dose of freshness together with what I feel is an extremely smooth dose of incense. I'm very sensitive to incense, but this is incense done in a way that I actually enjoy. So the EDT turns into a mix of intense marine, salty and spicy freshness together with a smooth dose of woodiness, whereas the Eau de Parfum changes into a mix of a bit of freshness and soft smokiness. So the EDT turns into something that is way more intensely fresh, whereas the Eau de Parfum tones down its freshness and goes into something that, at least to my nose, is a bit warmer and smokier. The drawdown of both is basically an extension of their mids. The Eau de Toilette still has a prominent dose of freshness, but its freshness is balanced up quite a bit with a prominent dose of what I think is an extremely smooth dose of woodiness. And Issey Miyake Le Sel, the Eau de Toilette, is basically a combination of an intense and nuanced kind of freshness together with what I feel is an extremely smooth dose of woodiness. And what really makes Le Sel, the Eau de Toilette shine is that unique marine freshness, and it's quite intense and somewhat unique kind of saltiness. It's bright, fresh and woody in what I feel is a unique way. The drawdown of Le Sel, the Eau de Parfum, is where the whole thing goes into a warmer, slightly sort of a warmer, woodier and more ambery direction. You have a tiny bit of the freshness from the opening in the drawdown of the Eau de Parfum, but I mean, comparing the freshness of these in the drawdown, this is a lot less fresh. You still have a bit of the smokiness from the incense in the drawdown. However, I do feel that the smokiness is the most prominent at the heart of it. So the Eau de Parfum, even with its fresh opening, at least on my skin, is actually more of an intensely ambery, woody and smoothly smoky scent. And I do feel a key difference is that even though they share some of that freshness, the EDT is more intensely fresh for longer with a more nuanced kind of freshness to it, whereas the Eau de Parfum quite quickly changes into something that, at least to my nose, is a bit darker, a bit warmer and in a way smoother. Le Sel, the Eau de Toilette, definitely has a lot more bite to its freshness, whereas this definitely feels a bit smoother. So moving on to the performance of these, and I do want to say that for fresh scents, both of these have really good longevity. But the biggest difference between the Eau de Toilette and the Eau de Parfum is definitely the projection. The EDT stays more intensely fresh for longer. And it's definitely a lot easier to pick up on the Eau de Toilette after it moves into the dry down. The scent cloud of the Eau de Parfum, once it moves into the dry down, is a lot more intimate. So let's talk a bit about the vibe and usage of both of these, and I do feel that both are fresh scents done in a classy and elegant way. But the intensity, nuance of the EDT's freshness actually, at least to my nose, makes it lean more towards a daytime summer use. The freshness of the Eau de Toilette under the warm summer sun is absolutely fantastic. The sort of a darker, slightly warmer and definitely a bit smoother dry down of the Eau de Parfum actually, at least to my nose, makes it lean more into summer nights. I mean, you can use both during summer days for sure, but I do feel that the more intensely fresh Eau de Toilette is better for summer days, and this is more for summer nights. As for seasons, I do feel that both of these are fresh and woody scents that lean more into spring and summer, with the focus on summer. While there are more mass appealing fresh summer scents out there, I'm gonna say that the unique freshness of both of these actually make these two more of a head turner kind of scents. And between the EDT and the Eau de Parfum, the EDT with its intense freshness, with its intense unique freshness, is definitely more of a head turner. The Eau de Parfum is simply a lot harder to get a whiff of once it hits the dry down. The Eau de Toilette is the more compliment getting scent out of the two. But overall, I do feel both are quite likable fresh scents. So let's talk about price and value. What I paid for the Eau de Toilette, if you compare it to most other designer freshies, was very affordable. I bought Le Sel de Issey, the Eau de Toilette, in a gift box that was actually cheaper than buying a similar bottle on its own. I paid a bit more for the bottle only of the Eau de Parfum, so this, at least in my case, was a bit more expensive. But if you take a look around at different discounters, you will most likely find both at quite affordable prices. So when talking about value here, their relatively low prices and the quality and uniqueness you're getting here is really good. So what are my final thoughts on Le Sel de Issey, the Eau de Toilette and the Eau de Parfum, and which of these two do I think is the best? There are some similarities for sure, and I do feel they share a bit of that fantastic unique freshness, but at the same time I also feel these two are quite different. But I guess the best way for me to explain it is that I fell in love with the Eau de Toilette thanks to its intense freshness, the uniqueness of it, and the nuance that it has. The freshness of the EDT is really why I crave wearing it. The Eau de Parfum is almost like two different fragrances in one. It opens up right away with a bit of the freshness from the EDT, but then it decides to go into something where it moves away from that fantastic freshness and into something that instead is more ambery, woody and smoky. And while I do think there's definitely a bit of uniqueness to that side of it, it's also at that point that I start missing the intense freshness of the EDT. And while the Eau de Parfum smells good for sure, I do think it loses quite a bit of its potency in the dry down. And the dry down of the Eau de Toilette is where the whole thing just keeps on pushing quite intensely from my skin. The more intensely fresh and bright Eau de Toilette is my favorite out of the two for sure. So based on that, which of these two is the best for you? In a way, I do think it's as simple as this. If you want a more intensely bright and fresh kind of scent, then it's definitely the EDT. If you think you would prefer a scent where that freshness quite quickly is toned down, giving room for something that is more ambery, woody and smoothly smoky, then it's the Eau de Parfum. Make sure you check out my reviews of both over there and let me know in the comments which of these two you think is the best and why. Drop a like and subscribe for more. Thank you, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.